Welcome to Built with Purpose. I am Chris Fay, and this is the show where vision meets execution and leadership leaves a legacy. From design studios to innovation hubs and product lines to skylines, we meet the people building more than great companies. They're creating culture, driving impact, and shaping what's next. These are the stories and strategies behind how the world gets built with purpose. Okay, everybody, welcome to Built with Purpose. Today is actually episode 2. I can honestly say, I am so excited and so fired up to have gotten this project launched. This project has been a long time in the making. We had our first episode launched last week with a great friend of mine and a phenomenal leader, Chad Cousins. He's the CEO of McMillan Paz & Smith Architecture, a great way to kick things off. We have some awesome podcasts coming around the corner with some amazing leaders and some leadership lessons. But I think one of the things that we're going to launch here at Built with Purpose is a section called Between the Builds. And Between the Builds is really an opportunity in between each of our guests to have a quicker, maybe 15 to 20 minute session that we can sit and kind of reflect back on last week's conversation, maybe kind of key out a leadership lesson or two, and then hopefully give you some actionable takeaways, in your life. And, one of the things I remember when I had the idea for this podcast, one of the things that I wanted to do is really just share the stories of all these amazing leaders that I have the opportunity to interact with. And so, today's a chance for me to kind of reflect on that and share some insights with you and hopefully kind of tee you up for the episode that's coming next. So welcome to our first episode of Between the Builds, which is actually our second episode of Built with Purpose. So you're going to get the build and the built, and you'll figure that out as we get rolling. And so anyway, so last week we had an awesome conversation with Chad. And, I've known Chad for many years, and Chad and I actually share some similar stories. He took over a business that was created by 3 founders that had actually merged their business together and had created this amazing architecture brand that was, really primarily focused in the Southeast. And Chad came in as a hired CEO and then ultimately became a partner in the business and is now really shepherding them forward into the next generation. And man, they have gone through a tremendous amount of growth and change. I've witnessed them acquire other firms. I've witnessed them take on a capital partner to help continually fuel growth. I've watched them kind of change their mindset in the way that they think about business and the way they think about growth and the way they think about serving their communities. So, kind of reflecting back on Chad's story and thinking around, transitioning leadership, going from a company that had been around for some time and bringing in new leaders, really this conversation, this idea of leadership transition really came to mind. And the reality is in many of our careers, we're going to have the opportunity to lead teams. Now, leading teams doesn't mean that you're like the CEO of a company. Leading teams just could be that you're leading your kid's baseball team, right? You're leading something at church. You're leading your family to do something on the weekend, or you're given an opportunity to lead a team of people in your career. But the reality is, you will oftentimes get into opportunities where you have the chance to lead. And that transition into leadership is one of the things that was just kind of hot on my mind. And I thought we'd kind of reflect back on, what are some of the key things that you can do? And what are some of the key success principles that you can deploy to make sure that your leadership transition is a success? I reflect back on what Chad was talking about, he kind of came into this business, he was actively listening to people inside of the organization. They had crafted this new vision for the company and how important that communication was to the rest of the team. And I started thinking about, when I first took over TPM, which is a business that I lead. And, actually it was founded by my father-in-law. And so I took over this legacy business and, came in and I'm shepherding it to the next level of growth. And at some point in the future, there'll probably be another leader that will help take the company to the next level. And I was starting to go back and think about what did I do well and what did I not do well when I was taking over the company and coming into this new leadership role. And I think one of the best things that I did, I happened to talk to a leader that was a really successful CEO in a couple of different companies, and the idea of the 100-day plan came to me, and he kind of taught me what he had done as having a 100-day plan, and the idea is, you come into a leadership role. You want to have a game plan for the first, call it 90 to 100 days of what you want to accomplish as a new leader. And for me, like I'm a big first impressions person. Like I believe that the impression that you lead with is the impression that will oftentimes last inside of individuals' minds or teams' minds. So when you come in as a new leader, you have a very short window to establish your leadership style, the way you're going to communicate with people, the way that you're going to work with people. So oftentimes I see leaders kind of come into roles, right? And they carry their past position into their current leadership role, and it takes them some time to transition. And I find that they have a harder time oftentimes getting into that leadership role and having the individual team members follow them, as opposed to coming in and looking at this as a call to action to change the way that you think, to change the way that you lead, and to embrace this new opportunity. So this idea of a 100-day plan and coming in and saying, all right, I've got 100 days or 90 days or 85 days, pick your number. I chose 100 days. 100 days to come in and to establish myself as a leader. I've got to set a first impression for how I'm going to lead. I've got to learn the business. I have to understand what it is about my role and what I'm supposed to be doing. I want to understand where I need to prioritize my time from a leadership perspective. And that's going to come from deep listening and learning. I also need to make sure I'm setting expectations for how I want to lead and shepherd the organization. Again, kind of back to that first impression. And by the end of that 100 days, I should have a pretty good lock on whatever it is that I'm leading and be in a position where I can communicate out what the future looks like. And I think that's really, if you think about what that 100 days is about, and again, no matter what you're leading, and obviously you're leading your kid's baseball team, you don't have 100 days, but you're coming into a new leadership role, having a finite time to effectively try and transition into that role is going to help you think about moving a little bit faster. So, one of the things I was thinking about what Chad was talking about, and also like some of the things that's happened successfully, in my career, is coming in and understanding that you're not the first person to do this, right? Like you're not the smartest person in the room. You're not the best leader that's come across the door. The reality is nobody's ever ready to step into the next level of leadership. You're going to be outside of your comfort zone, right? And you have to learn and adapt. So I think coming in and being a bit humble to say, look, I'm going to come in at the very beginning of this 100-day plan, and I'm just going to begin to listen, and I'm going to communicate to my team and begin to start setting the expectations of the path by which I'm going to lead. So when I came in, I actually interviewed every single person, in the company. And I wanted to just kind of sit down. I wanted to listen and learn, like, hey, what makes you tick? Like, where are you? I want to connect with them personally, right? Not just in a business sense, but connect with them personally. Like, what drives you? What motivates you? What do you like about your job? What do you not like about your job? Like, what is it that you see this company needing to do in the coming months, years, to continue moving us in the right direction? So it was a great opportunity to listen. The other thing that I did in those one-on-one interviews is I started kind of crafting the message for how I wanted to lead and how I wanted to communicate with them. And I think it's extremely important to make sure that a leader sets the expectation for how they intend to lead. And, again, I was new. I was a new leader of this company. I was still learning how I wanted to lead from my past experiences, but I had a few concepts in my mind ahead of time that I could proactively communicate people. And it was things like, hey, look, like I'm a super open, honest communicator. So I really want you to feel very comfortable talking to me because I'm going to feel very comfortable talking to you. And so I want to make sure that we can establish this relationship and we can break down barriers in communication and open up the dialogue so that we can have a conversation. Because I knew that opening up lines of communication are ultimately one of the foundational elements to effectively leading teams. So I want to try and break down the barriers in those individual conversations, right? So, hey, what's going on with you? This is kind of what's going on with me. These are the things that I'm thinking about. This is the way that I lead. How do you like to be communicated to? This is kind of like how I like to be communicated to. And I did that 100 times. I mean, we had 100 people. I have 100 people in the organization. I did that 100 times with, our receptionist, to our controller, to our sales team, to our leadership team. And that was probably one of the best ways for, number one, for me to learn the company. Number two, for me to learn about the folks on the team. And then for each individual to have kind of a one-on-one experience of what it's like to work with me. And I think that established some amazing trust, with those individuals. Obviously they felt like they were being heard. They had a chance to sit down and express their ideas and concepts. And so, man, I was just like feverishly taking notes. Today, I would just sit there and I would record every meeting, and then I would synthesize all those recordings in AI and come up with a game plan. But, let's call it back in the olden days, I actually had to write notes and synthesize those myself. But that was probably one of the most amazing things that I did. And what I didn't do early on is I didn't come in and start making monumental change. Like that first month or so, I was not making monumental change. I was listening and learning and beginning to start influencing the way that I was going to build the company. Kind of the latter part of that 100 days was really more about starting to develop the plan. Okay, I've kind of heard everybody. I understand, kind of what's going on. I want to dig a little bit deeper into the business. And now it's time for me to start formulating the plan. And in formulating the plan, that's not just me in a vacuum, but it's kind of synthesizing and bringing together all these thoughts and ideas from each of these individuals, right? And then I began to have some team meetings, right? So, hey, in this part of the business, this is kind of what I heard and some of the things are going. Like, what are the top 1 to 2 things that we would want to take action on, right, in the next 90 days to start making some progress in this area of the business? Accounting, sales, whatever. And so we basically kind of took that opportunity to bring all of that together and to meet with the teams and to start thinking about what are the couple things that we can take action on. I think oftentimes a new leader can come in and be a little bit ambitious, like me. Like I can come in, I'm like, full of piss and vinegar. I'm ready to like hit the ground running. I want to tackle the world. I want to solve all the problems. But the reality is you can't solve all the problems at any one time. You have to take action on the most important and impactful problems that will move the business forward. And there was this great book. It's called The One Thing. I'll make sure I put the link in here on the podcast. But the concept was, what's the one thing that I can do such that everything else becomes easier or less important? And I think oftentimes we come in and we're like, man, we got to solve this and this and this and this and this. I got to get that and that and that and that. And the reality is, if you try to attack all those issues at one time, you're going to end up not making progress on hardly anything. The way to drive acceleration in any business is to focus on the fewest number of high impact decisions and high impact changes that you can make to propel that company forward. So the book, The One Thing, was a great inspiration for me. And so that was what we did. We kind of came in and we had all these ideas, hundreds of ideas of things that we could do. And we had to bring all that down in each department or each division to what's like the 1 or 2 things that we need to be taking action on. And then as a company, if we could bring all of those ideas together, what's the 1 or 2 things that we could be taking action on in a company over the next 90 days? And so what that does is it shows the team that you're listening and you're learning and you're hearing them. You're starting to bring people in. They have buy-in to making the decisions and ultimately identifying what those top priorities are. And then it shows the way that you're going to lead and that you're going to focus on some of those key priorities over the next 90 days to start taking some action in the business. And I will tell you, one of the best things that a leader can do is to begin to take action and have substantial positive change from the action that they have deployed. So to hear somebody express their concerns, to synthesize those concerns or ideas into a plan, to take action on that plan, and for your team to see results. Talk about buying into your leadership style and how you're going to ultimately shepherd this company or team or business forward. That is the formula for success. And then once you do that, you start gaining momentum. So now the team's like, oh my God, like, man, that leader's going to listen to me. They're going to take my actions. They're going to work with the rest of the team to get buy-in. We're then going to we're going to prioritize those actions. We're going to put that in place. And oh my God, I saw us put that in place. Now let's go on and attack the next one and attack the next one. And all of a sudden you see these barriers of communication being broken down. You see buy-in across the organization, and you begin to see people buying into your vision because they see you taking action. And that's one of the things as a leader you need to be thinking about is those people that you are leading. Those people that you are leading are looking to you to help shepherd their business and their career forward. They want you to take action. They want to see change. And so it's up to you as a leader to figure out the right type of change to make in that business. Now, one of the things that Chad and I talked about is this balance of legacy. He had taken over a business that had been around probably 20 or 30 years. I had taken over a business that had been around over 30 something years. And you have to respect the legacy of the business of what got you to that point today, but you have to create a new vision and plan to start changing the trajectory of that business and start moving the company in a new direction. So kind of this balance of legacy, right, and innovation is critically important as well. And I think Chad did an amazing job of that. I feel like we've successfully done that and balancing like what got us here in the company and respecting that and listening and learning, and then taking all of the good things that made the company what it is and taking some of the things that probably need to change, right? Put them into a plan and begin to take action. So, kind of thinking about leadership transition, that was really the thing that came to mind. Is I just kind of came back to this like 100-day plan. I started thinking about first impressions of your leadership tenure and how important it is to set expectations and to communicate early and often with your team. How important it is to listen to the team members and actually get some insights and some barriers broken down between you and the team to understand what's going on in the business and to also help communicate out how you're going to lead and how you want to communicate. And then to be able to synthesize those ideas into some top key priorities that you can drive action and see some success on, over a 90-day window, and then to execute. And then all of a sudden you start seeing that become infectious and the momentum begins to increase. So a lot of leaders we're going to talk to in the podcast, or they're going to be ones that have started companies. They've got folks that have transition businesses. Oddly enough, in the architecture, engineering, and construction space, you have a lot of like multi-generation businesses, right? So we're going to talk to a lot of folks about transitioning companies. We've got some amazing entrepreneurs that we're going to speak to in the coming months. And then what I'll do is come back and we'll reflect on this with Between the Builds and just hopefully give you some actionable steps that you can take in your career. So with that, I hope you all have an amazing day. I'm looking forward to next week and keep building with purpose. Okay, thanks for joining me on Built with Purpose. If you have enjoyed today's episode, subscribe, share, and leave us a review. It helps more bold leaders find the show. For resources and show notes, visit our website and connect with me, Chris Fay, on LinkedIn. Until next time, keep building great companies, cultures, and legacies with purpose.